You're listening to another episode of the Gareth podcast, where we discuss nature news and interview the finest minds in the ecosphere. I'm Gareth, former park ranger and permanent conservationist. Today, my guest is Abuma, my friend and neighbor, an expert in, well, I guess we'll find out today. Today we're going to discuss some interesting headlines for environmental news in Canada, Alberta, and even the Yukon. I would like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my current job. It is, however, my passion to spread awareness about environmental news and events to the general public. I would also like to thank our sponsors. Dear God, please somebody give me money. And on to the show. So for today's episode, we're doing another news roundup. It seemed like the last one was pretty well received, and there has been a lot going on since my last update on the news. Jumping right into it, we have a story about a microbe biogas energy project. Fun fact, we now have poop-powered cities before we got GTA 6. People are using microbes to turn waste into biogas, which is methane, carbon dioxide, etc. This is being done in Richmond, BC. So essentially, biogas was being created at a BC sewage plant, which is now going to be sold back to provincial gas providers. This happened over in Richmond. They built a high-tech mini sewage digester that they're seeding with naturally occurring microbial populations that digest the organic matter. And the goal at the end of the day is to serve a bunch of the municipalities in BC's lower mainland. Abuma, any thoughts on having a poop-powered city?
It's very interesting that we got this before GTA 6. That's the most interesting thing to me. What I would say, though, is that's a whole new meaning of running on shit. Yes, running on shit. I am curious as to how sustainable it is. I mean, we all shit, right?
Yeah.
We all, take a poop here and there. Apparently women don't, but we all do, right? So I'm very interested and curious to see how big this becomes and how sustainable it is.
Yeah, it says that the biogas facility began operating in 2021, and it has cost $11 million so far. I'm not clear if that's public money or if that's private venture capital funding, but it's now producing 60,000 gigajoules of energy each year. There are currently 300 active biogas projects from farm or landfill waste.
What is a gigajoule of energy?
I wish I could tell you exactly how much it is. I know that on a lot of labels, let's see, gigajoules to kilowatt hours. So 1 gigajoule is 277 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
Now, to put that into perspective, 1 kilowatt hour is equal to what? How long could I power a light bulb? It's equal to 1,000 watts. So how long could I power a light bulb with 1 kilowatt hour? How long to power light bulb? 1 kilowatt hour is 1,000 watts used for 1 hour. So a 100 watt light bulb operating for 10 hours would be 1 kilowatt hour. So let's see. So 277 kilowatt hours for 1 gigajoule would be, oh God, mental math is failing me right now. A lot.
You know what? I'm sold. I'm going to shit as much as I can. Moving to Richmond, BC. Going to shit as much as I can. Help the environment.
To do it for the environment.
100%.
Turn on all the lights in your house.
Yes.
You're doing good.
Got to shit in the dark too to make power.
For the next one we've got, the next headline. This was another interesting one. So let's just open that one back up again. How climate change could affect death investigations. So forensic investigations rely on intel about the natural world that climate change is disrupting. The story is not for the squeamish, so if you don't like talking about forensics and dead bodies, then skip about probably 5-ish minutes. A lot of insects are often used to determine location and length of death, but they're changing their ranges and lifestyles as the climate changes. So, for example, forensic researchers would look at a body and be like, oh, well, this larvae is at this stage of development, therefore the body has been here for a week, 2 weeks, etc. And if there was a bug that isn't normally found in a certain area, then they might presume, well, the body has been moved, because this bug is only found in this area. But now with the ranges changing, winters shortening, like certain bugs that we all know about, like mountain pine beetles, we've heard of how much they've expanded their range. So a lot of the bugs that, like bodies, are also expanding their range and changing their life cycles. One interesting thing that I noticed in this article as well, they were talking about a relatively new forensic technique that involves linking water isotopes in the human body to the water in specific locations. With changing rain patterns, these isotopes will be found in different areas. So you might be familiar with Canada's nuclear reactors. We do produce some nuclear power. I think they're called the CANDU nuclear reactors.
Okay.
So there are certain weird isotopes like deuterium and tritium, which are, I'm going to butcher the science. Oh God, someone's going to... Okay, you know what? I'm going to have to look this up just so I don't misspeak now. They have extra... Is it extra hydrogen? Okay. Deuterium. As I lose all the listeners right now. So, normal hydrogen has the two hydrogen, or the one hydrogen proton, one neutron. I butchered that. I'm gonna have to cut that. All right. After a brief science break, I have refreshed my high school chemistry. So, regular hydrogen, which would be in water, is referred to as protium. It has one proton, one electron. Deuterium has one proton, one neutron, one electron, and tritium has one proton, two neutrons, and an electron. So those are the hydrogen isotopes, and they occur in different quantities naturally in the wild. Okay. So if Alberta, for example, had, and I didn't look this up specifically, but let's say Alberta had higher deuterium and Quebec had higher tritium for some reason, we could predict that there would be different amounts of isotopes in the bodies. Again, as rain patterns are shifting, that technique may no longer be quite as valid.
I see. One thing I'm going to touch on here, especially with the microbes and the insects. I remember as a kid watching CSI, and that got me into... I mean, alongside listening to the Ranger Gareth podcast, I listened to
Yes!
a lot of crime podcasts as well. And that point of making, getting, say, maggots or microbes in the body to identify a specific time of death or a range of time of death, with things shifting, I wonder how that balances. I guess it makes it harder to begin with, right? If things are shifting and we don't know what exactly to expect, right? But I wonder how that balances against like the technological side of that, like the genetic, what do you call that? Using DNA to kind of see who committed a crime. It's gone really, really far in terms of genealogy and family lines. You can kind of predict this person from this family did this particular thing. I wonder how that balances out.
Have you heard the stories of murderers getting caught because one of their family members did a 23andMe
Exactly.
test?
Yeah. So I wonder how that balances out. If that would not even make any difference because we have so much technology, or if we need to catch up with that as well.
I wonder, because I
don't
feel
want
like
people getting away with murder, right? It's terrible.
Well, as the planet heats up as well, bodies are going to break down faster.
True.
Because you go to a tropical area, first off, the heat is damaging more insect life, more animal life. Things are going to be more active. Whereas you hear about bodies that are on top of Everest that will probably be there forever, frozen and mummified.
Yeah.
Unless the planet heats up so much that even Everest melts.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
That would be terrible. Yes.
We have another good one here, talking about flood infrastructure. Now, I know people have probably heard me gripe about this a few times. Infrastructure all over the world is being neglected because it's not, a sexy project. Nobody wants to run on a platform, it seems, where they're like, yeah, I'm going to champion fixing the water pipes, even though Calgary recently had that major water main burst. Yeah. And now they're checking all their other water mains. A lot of our infrastructure is also very, very old because Edmonton is over 100 years old. A lot of the infrastructure is probably about that old as well. We have, I hope we don't have any more lead pipes, but have you ever seen pictures of what old water pipes looked like when they were built out of wood?
Haven't, though.
There are a lot of old, strange pipes. Some people think that part of the reason Mill Creek smells funny
It's because of that.
old, bad pipes that aren't necessarily up to where they should be. But this headline is urban flooding becoming a more pressing threat as Canada's infrastructure ages? More Toronto flooding and Montreal's water main break, the latest in a series of flood events this summer. So this article came out August 17th. There was also the major blow up in Calgary. This year, Montreal and Calgary both had major water pipes fail. In June, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities called on all three levels of government to convene a meeting to discuss threats facing municipalities, including crumbling infrastructure. Just a side note, I watched another really good documentary on YouTube called Dam Nation.
Okay.
And it was all about removing all dams and the threat of dam collapses, because a lot of the dams in the United States also came about in the early 1900s when there was major infrastructure spending. I believe it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt who did the New Deal, where he made a bunch of like federally funded make work projects.
Okay.
And a lot of that included major infrastructure spending. But infrastructure spending doesn't really grab the headlines as much as championing a certain social cause or being an activist for a certain kind of thing.
Yeah.
Politicians whose whole focus is just, I'm going to fix the bridges and replace the pipes, they'll probably do more good for us in the long run, but they might not be remembered as long, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Jeff Stewart, who's the president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, said the funding for municipal infrastructure maintenance is badly outdated and hasn't accounted for factors like rapid population growth and climate change. Have you ever heard of, I forget exactly what the term is, but Edmonton has a city plan where they want the city to have 2 million people by 2050?
2050, 2 million people.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting there really quick, I'll tell you that.
But we're over 1 million already.
Yes.
And with the amount of growth happening, you got the whole west side, Secord, Rosenthal, the whole southwest, that whole new Windermere area. The city is growing like crazy.
It is.
And that's part of the reason why there's so much focus on getting a proper train system up and running. If Edmontonians could quit driving into the train and did you hear did you hear it got derailed recently?
I didn't hear that, but I saw a video on what do you call that?
Was it Yegwave?
Yegwave.
Yeah, man.
Shout out Yegwave.
Shout out Yegwave.
I saw a video on Yegwave of some guy that almost hit the train and he had to do a U-turn as quick as possible. Like, don't people watch these days?
What's with the whole no right on red? There are a lot of people saying, oh, well, they should have put down the crossing arms and everything. But if you can't read the street signs, what are you doing on the road?
Yeah, how did you pass your driver's test?
It bothers me. It
really does.
It's because I drive a lot for my job and just because I have a truck and I do a lot of things on my days off. The signage is adequate.
Yes.
You don't need a flashy blinky light and a crossing arm if you just read the signs. Oh God,
that is correct.
I could go down that rabbit hole so much. It's just, it's a joke. It's a joke. But yeah, we definitely need to do a lot of infrastructure spending to keep up with this, because if we're going to be adding another 1 million people, which would double our current population, I think we're at about 1 million right now. We're going to need to fix the water system, the sewage system, the electrical system.
A lot of systems, I'll tell you. We need to fix a lot of things, focus on stuff that you can't really see, I guess. That's the big thing, right? You can't see all these infrastructure systems, but that's what we need to focus on so we don't see them, right? Like, Calgary didn't see, like, if they had a plan to focus on the water thing, they wouldn't have seen a flood, right?
Yeah.
So we need to fix things before we can see them.
And that's part of the, I forget who is... I'm sorry, I won't be able to give you the credit you deserve, but somebody told me a funny thing about owning a house as well, where they said, you don't notice the things until they break.
Exactly.
Like, if your sewage system is working fine, you're not thinking about it. If it backs up and floods your basement, you know right away.
Exactly.
You know right away. Sorry, going back to Jeff Stewart, president of the FCM, he said it was never designed to deal with this massive infrastructure that we have. It was never designed to deal with climate change and climate adaptation and all these things, and it's putting a very heavy burden on municipalities. Another individual, John Gamble, president of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of Canada, said that a key step toward tackling the issue would be to launch a national assessment to identify Canada's long-term infrastructure needs. He pointed to the commitment the federal Liberal government made in 2021 to present a national assessment, a commitment that has not yet been fulfilled. No way, another broken government promise? Never. Never. I just... Maybe I'm boring. I just want someone that is going to focus on some of those very basic things. Like,
that's fair.
Well, do you remember during the... Oh, God, why am I forgetting exactly when it happened? January, February of this year, where we had the extreme cold snap, and the provincial government was warning that we would have rolling blackouts.
Yeah.
How is that happening in a first world country during a relatively warm winter?
Yes.
Like, this was not our coldest winter. It was not our longest winter. How are we still at risk of this? It's interesting. If we need to get over those kind of problems before we double our population,
yes.
if we have pipes bursting, if we have inadequate sewage treatment facilities, if we have the risk of blackouts every time we have a cold snap in what is still a fairly wintry country, we need to fix some of that.
You know what I would say with the sewage thing and the power thing? We just need to be like Richmond, right? Get power from our shit, right?
I'm shocked it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. I think Edmonton is very progressive as well, right? That's one thing that they actually may implement, right? So, just some ideas for whoever wants to campaign.
Well, like
that may be good.
Well, like Epcor is legit. Sponsor me. But like, because have you ever been by their Gold Bar wastewater treatment plant?
I haven't. No.
It's actually very advanced. They have. I'm not going to get into the science because I know I'll butcher it and I might get sued. But just go over there one day and check it out. Like you can. I don't know if they still do public tours, but and again, like I wouldn't drink the water directly from there.
Yeah.
But they clean it up very, very well, and they have their whole Glass of the Sask campaign that they were doing this summer. I don't know if it's still ongoing right now.
What is that, Glass of the Sask?
So they're trying to promote how clean they get the water from the river.
Okay.
Because, like we all know, you don't really want to drink the water straight from the river. You'll get all kinds of strange diseases.
Of course.
But we don't think that the water that comes out of our taps is the exact same water from that river. Yeah. It's all sucked out, all the dirt and the gunk and the bacteria gets taken out, and then it's fine for us to drink. I'm trying to think. I don't think we've ever had a boil water advisory in Edmonton. Epcor, they do good. They do good work.
Shout out to Epcor.
Shout out.
Sponsor him.
Please, for God's sake.
Break. I'll take a quick break.
Oh, yeah. All right, jumping into our next article here. Wildfires devastated Jasper. The soot and ash are putting Alberta's glaciers at risk, scientists warn. Ash is darkening the Athabasca Glacier, causing it to absorb more solar heat and hastening glacier melt. Things are not looking so good for our glaciers. It makes me sad. But what's happening is, the dark layer of ash on the glaciers is increasing the rate of solar absorption, which could speed up the glacial melting. There's something that I remember from, I believe it was elementary or junior high science, called the albedo effect, which is an expression of the ability of surfaces to reflect sunlight. So dark surfaces like charcoal absorb the rays from the sun, which is low albedo. Light surfaces like snow reflect a large part of the sun rays back to the atmosphere, high albedo. According to measurements, the Athabasca Glacier melted nearly 9 meters last year, a record for the glacier that has been visited by millions of people and is an iconic stop in Alberta's Icefields Parkway. A study published in 2022 suggests the surface stayed dark beyond the fire season because algae had formed on the surface, feeding on the soot and thriving in warmer conditions, another consequence of climate change. We got soot, we got ash, we got algae, we got heat. I'm actually going to be at the glacier next month because I'm doing a glacier and mountaineering course in a month.
Okay.
So I guess I'll get to see it in person before it disappears, which is pretty sad.
It's pretty sad, yeah.
Have you been to the down the Icefields Parkway?
Yeah.
You've been to that glacier?
It's really nice. When I was there, even in the summer, because it's a glacier, right? It's pretty cold there. Mm-hmm. It's terrible that things are really degrading, and 9 meters a year, it's
shocking.
It's shocking, yeah. If it continues at this rate, who knows when they'll disappear, right? I think we don't want to tamper with it too much, but if there's a way to kind of get things off it, just to preserve it, that'd be nice.
Even if someone went up there with like just a big old scraper and took off a layer.
Yeah, that would be nice.
I actually wonder about the feasibility of that, because if you could just scoop off like the first inch, get rid of some of that grime, maybe it would look like a glacier again. And oh god, I had a thought about that. Oh right, one of the big issues as well that faces us in Edmonton and people down in Calgary and stuff is the glaciers are also a major source of our river water. That's like how cities like ours survive, because the North Saskatchewan does have a large drainage basin, but the headwaters for a lot of our major rivers all start in the mountains with these glaciers. If we lose those glaciers, our water supply becomes a lot more precarious, because then we're just relying on rainwater and groundwater instead of just a specific melt rate every year from these glaciers. So this could be
that may have contributed to kind of the flooding. It's melting at a higher rate.
I'm not sure, because like I know that Edson flooded recently, but I think that was just due to the flash rainstorm.
Okay.
I don't know how much increased glacial melt would relate to flooding. I feel like because the glacier would have to melt very quickly in order to flood a town. I think it's mainly just the rainstorms that are doing that.
Okay.
We got another one here. Would naming heat waves change how you respond to the threat of heat? A name or ranking of an extreme weather event can make it easier to communicate the risks, experts say. Now, I'll be honest, my first reaction was that this seems like a little over the top, a little sensational, but I'm also a person that can't handle the heat already. When it goes above like 27 degrees Celsius, I feel my brain shutting down. I am, like the weather right now, like plus 10 to minus 10, that's my ideal operating range. Like I could just thrive in that. You got more outfit options. You can drink your nice hot chalky on a cold day. Like plus 10 to minus 10, it's cold enough that you can actually ice fish, but it's not so cold you lose feeling in your feet. Yeah. Plus 10 to minus 10 is great, but...
So you're more of a fall guy, aren't you?
Oh, we're coming up to my season right now. Like we had a good summer. A great summer. I saw a lot of Fringe shows. It was fantastic. But when it gets above 27, I'm hiding inside.
Yeah, those days it was 38, man. 38. Some I think a day hit 40. It was crazy.
That's not right here.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
If you could name, they say, start naming heat waves, right? Mm-hmm. You could name the first heat wave in Alberta, in Edmonton. Okay. What would you name it?
Ooh, it would have to be something good. It would have to be something menacing.
Yeah.
Oh, but I wonder if they wanted to, because if they do it like hurricanes, it would have to be the first letter of the alphabet. Something like Achilles, Astartes. Something with an A that sounds menacing. Agamemnon. Yeah. Something like that.
Something that people have to think about. Huh. Yeah. His name is pretty terrible, right?
Yeah. Heatwave Agamemnon strikes. I'd be like, okay, this is serious. What about you? If you had to name the first.
If it goes off the letters, I don't have one. But if I'm number 3, C, Heatwave Cruella.
I was gonna say we got Heatwave Abuma right here. We got
that is true.
You're in. You're
I don't want people to look at me like a bad person, man.
Associated with like 30 deaths.
I mean, I am hot. Don't get me wrong, but not that hot, you know.
It is scary. So just quoting someone right here: heat is underappreciated as a risk and as a health risk, but it's responsible in terms of looking at climate impacts, said Caroline Metz, member of the Executive Committee of Climate Proof Canada and Managing Director of the Intact Centre of Climate Adaptation, University of Waterloo. Heat is serious and it can be deadly, and what we're seeing because of climate change or climate warming is that heat waves are lasting longer, they're more intense, and they're happening more often. According to experts who want to name heat waves, a name or a ranking of an extreme weather event makes it much easier to communicate the associated risks. Sevilla, Spain, launched the first pilot project to name and rank heat waves in 2022. That year, a Category 3 heat wave, the most severe tier, was named Zoe. Hey, wait, they started with the last letter? Okay, never mind. Never mind. I might have gotten it wrong.
That sounds like a really nice heat wave.
Zoe sounds nicer than Cruella.
Zoe, like, you know?
Zoe sounds chill.
Yeah.
In 2021, a ranking system was launched in Athens, Greece, ranking heat waves from 0 to 3. The program has since expanded to 6 other cities.
Okay.
According to Statistics Canada, in Canada's 12 major cities from 2000 to 2020, about 670 excess non-accidental deaths, 115 excess cardiovascular deaths, and 115 excess respiratory deaths are attributable to the increased mortality risks during extreme heat. Okay. Just to make it more serious, I know we joke a lot, but this really affects older people, especially because they're less able to adapt.
Yes.
Another thing I hadn't thought about is during cold snaps, I guess that also increases risk to older people because I'm going to butcher the science again. I really need to do better research, but I believe it was colder weather leads to higher blood pressure because the blood vessels on the surface restrict, leading to further issues like heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, stuff like that for older people especially.
Interesting.
Which is why, oh God, I forget the group again, but there was a group that was arguing that air conditioning and climate-controlled environments were a human right. I don't know if they got very far with that case, but I see it for like our older population that just cannot handle the heat. Like if I struggle like this in my healthy 30s with heat, I don't know how I'm going to do in my 80s if I make it that long.
You know what is also crazy? Like a bunch of buildings in Edmonton, since they're still old, so a lot of people during the heat waves, they didn't have AC.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to have one. It's really loud, but I'll take it, right? But a lot of people don't have AC. Yeah. And that is a problem, right? People develop not even, they can be very detrimental to the older population, but people also develop lighter things like rashes and stuff like that because it's so hot, right?
Have you ever had a heat rash?
No, I haven't, no.
I haven't, but I know one day my sister got way too hot outside, and she actually got like a little big rash, blotchy hives all over her. Oh, yeah,
that's terrible.
It was not a good day. Like she lived. Hi, Emily.
Thank God.
But yeah, like that was scary because her whole body just broke out. And
interesting.
I'm happy that I never got that, but again, heat is not my friend.
Yeah. What I would ask though, what do you think is the better option? The thing that Athens is doing, the number scale, or the one that Sevilla was doing? Zoe seems very chill. If that wasn't a very bad heat wave, then yes, I agree. But also think about it in terms of technology, right? Like if you had a heat wave, what would trend on Twitter? Would it be 3 or would it be a name?
Oh yeah, in terms of like trending and communications, names would be better because we still talk about like Hurricane Katrina. Like we can think of that, but we don't think of like the bad hurricane in year 2000 something.
That was, but also look at earthquakes though, magnitudes, right? They don't really name earthquakes, but the magnitudes the numbers are sometimes high enough that you're like, okay, we need to evacuate, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how to compare an earthquake to a tsunami to a heat wave, but I guess naming versus numbers, what might be better?
This is actually good. All right, anyone that's actually listening to the show, we're gonna put this as a poll. Would you rather have heat waves named or simply ranked by number? So I'll put that in the poll. Check it out in the show notes. I want to hear what everyone else thinks because I think the name is a little scarier, but would also make communication easier.
Yes.
So
interesting. I go with the name too, but
yeah, we'll see what people think. Another story we got: world's most effective climate policies are identified in a new study. Some of you have heard of the whole metaphor of like the carrot versus the stick when it comes to like a donkey. You put the carrot in front of it and you lead it based on its own motivations, or you just stick and hit it and force it to move in your right direction. So examples would be like if you get a rebate for buying an electric car, that's a carrot. Whereas if you increase the tax on gasoline vehicles, that's the stick.
That's the stick, okay.
So a lot of countries around the world have implemented a variety of different policies to try and cut their carbon emissions. And they did a study to see which policies worked out the best. They did a study of 1,500 policies around the world. They started with a database of climate policies in 41 countries by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which divided them into 4 sectors: industry, electricity, transport, and buildings. The researchers then used computer algorithms to look for big emissions drops, in this study referred to as larger than 4.5%, filtering out economic fluctuations such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And then they compared the timing of those emissions drops with the implementation of the 1,500 climate policies listed in the database between 1998 and 2022. The 63 successful policies identified led to emissions reductions of between 0.6 and 1.8 billion metric tons. And researchers believe that implementing some of these policies in other countries before 2030 could significantly cut the country's emissions and help them get closer to meeting their emissions targets. First interesting fact: carbon pricing works for developed countries, but not developing ones. That one, you can kind of see that one just in practice. In Canada, we're very lucky, we're very privileged. We have options. We can choose to bike to work because we have bike lanes in at least part of the city, even though some people get really mad about bike lanes, but we have options. We have like a good trail system. You can walk, you can bike. We have a transit system. Some people argue whether it's functional or not, but
It's crossing arms, right?
people are crossing arms. But we have the option of that, and then we also have hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, regular gasoline vehicles, as well as a mix of like semi-powered vehicles like the e-bikes, the e-scooters, stuff like that. Whereas you go to somewhere that is poorer, less developed, and your options are walk or take a gas-powered vehicle. That's just the reality for some people, and it's not really fair for someone in Canada to say, hey, Bangladesh needs to cut their emissions. It's like, well, like they might if they could, but not to target Bangladesh specifically. I'm sure they have a lot going for them, but it's just different economic realities.
That is true. Yeah, Canada is very privileged in that we have a lot of things, a lot of modes of transport. You can choose gas, you can choose electric, hybrid. I think even hydrogen-powered cars are coming soon, right?
Yeah, I know that we trialed hydrogen buses for a while, too.
Yeah, so we have that option, but place like, and I'm from Nigeria, right? Place like Nigeria, it's very hard to get that kind of technology in, just because there's a lot of people, and it's a lot of underprivileged people as well. Mm-hmm. You can't force them to survive on, or get an option where they can't even afford, right? The economic reality is a big thing. When they get to that stage, or when we get to that stage, then that's a possibility. But in terms of the thing of the or scenario of the carrot and the stick, right? I always feel like you should have a choice, right? I don't think you should be forced into buying an electric car. Incentives would be nice. I like my gas-powered cars, but if I got a good enough incentive, I might switch, right?
Yeah.
And there's people that just like the electric cars, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's also people that, like me, they might switch if they have a good enough incentive, right? If it saves them money, if it, does something for them, right? Then they're more likely to switch over. Raising the taxes on gas-powered cars, my opinion, it's very forceful, and if say 25% of the population moves from gas to electric, then that is still saving emissions, right? That is still saving, reducing our carbon footprint. So slowly but surely, I think everyone would switch over.
Yeah.
A lot of car enthusiasts, they like their gas-powered cars, but people are coming up with some really cool vehicles. And
like the charging infrastructure, it's not where it needs to be yet.
Yes, that is true.
But they're still investing in it. It's still on the way. I don't think we're going to be all electric by 2030. I feel like some of those goals are a bit short-sighted. The amount of investment needed in the charging infrastructure, it's just, it would be very difficult. I recently did a road trip, as you know, all the way up the Tuktoyaktuk. Yeah. In a lot of those areas, you're lucky to find gas. Mm-hmm. That might be the only gas station for 300 kilometers in either direction. Like, there are areas where they will still lag behind. Like, you can have an electric vehicle in Edmonton and drive it around. You could even go to some of the surrounding communities, St. Albert, Sherwood Park. You could do that. But if you were going to spend a lot of time in northern Alberta, you might not have the reliable charging infrastructure. But it will get there eventually. Yeah. One of the people that did this study as well mentioned something interesting. In a lot of lower income countries where the economies are less formal, there might not be anyone to calculate, collect, or track things like carbon taxes. For example, in Nigeria, you have your formal economy, then you'd have your informal economy. You'd have farmers markets, you'd have bartering, you would have a lot of people that might just take money and not report it. So how would you even track how people are adhering to these carbon policies? Like, I think
impossible.
Well, I think you said that, like, you don't even know how many people actually live there for sure because the census isn't accurate.
It's very hard because in terms of census, allocation of money is very important, right? So people might over-report or they might under-report sometimes, right? So we have a rough estimate. I want to say about 220 million people.
Still blows my mind how many people there are.
It's pretty high up, but it's also, it may be 180, it may be 240, who knows? Who knows, right?
And like another thing, all right, because Lagos is obviously the largest city in Nigeria.
Yeah.
What's the second biggest?
Ooh. Oh. Maybe Kano State, which is up north. I know Kano State, the capital of Kano is Kano. It has the second largest population. It's a bigger state in terms of population density. Lagos has it, but I think Kano is the biggest, second biggest. Don't quote me on that.
No, but if you were Prime Minister of Nigeria,
okay,
how hard do you think it would be to build a train from Lagos to Kano State? Like, if you wanted to have like the new tech, you wanted a nice new clean train to improve transit in that area, how difficult do you think that would be? Like, in terms of funding, in terms of bribing, in terms of money getting siphoned off?
Oh.
Like
very hard.
Do you think it would actually like be able to be completed within, say, 20 years properly? Because I know even in Edmonton,
it's hard.
We have trouble building trains.
Yeah. It's very hard to do that. I think in terms of how the system works there, it may be near impossible to do that. I think there used to be a railway system all the way from the north to the south, but everything infrastructure wise is outdated, so it's hard. And just the funding, the actual work getting done, justifying it is another thing. Like, you want to build a whole new technological thing and people don't even have the basic necessities, right? That's a hard thing. I want to say it's a very complicated question, but 20 years may not be possible. No, it's very hard.
Working down on the incentives list again. It looks like, according to this study, carbon pricing does work in terms of emissions reductions. Myself, I hate it. But that's because I like keeping my own money. But according to the people that did this study, it does actually lead to a measurable reduction in emissions reductions. But everyone in this think tank admits that having the mix of the carbon pricing and the other incentives, like, vehicle incentives, rebates, stuff like that, that is the best way to get it done. Even though I would rather prefer just carrots and no sticks. Getting on to a slightly sadder story. Alberta's roadkill numbers soar, with more than 7,000 animals reported hit and killed last year. Again, that is just the amount of animals that were recorded. And the headline also specifies that almost 400 snake carcasses were reported to it in 2023. Now, keep in mind, the actual numbers are probably higher because I doubt every single
one gets reported.
I doubt they all get reported. 7,000 animals were reported hit and killed by vehicles last year. That is a 73% increase since 2019. Deer are the most commonly killed animal on Alberta's roads, and the data suggests that more than 4,250 have been reported killed in each of the last 3 years. I don't think we're running out of deer, but still, that is a staggering number. 4,000 a year. Other animals that are commonly killed by cars every year are skunks, coyotes, rabbits, raccoons, porcupines, moose, and pet dogs and cats. Part of the, I've almost hit a few animals. I did, as I was telling you when we took a little break there, I did hit a bear years ago, and that's how I lost my second car. It was a juvenile black bear, maybe 200-ish pounds. I almost hit an elk a different year when I had my first car because they're so dark and they blend in really well at night. Some of these animals can be so hard to see, and if you do a lot of driving at dawn or dusk when they're most active, it can be very dangerous. Especially because moose, they're so dark and they're so tall that if you hit it, you're just going to take out its legs and the body's going to go right through your windshield. Dale Guino, who's with the Edmonton-based wildlife rescue and rehab organization Wild North, said the snake deaths may be an outlier because he believes there may be a hibernacula near the road, which is an underground refuge for snakes during the winter. That's a fun word you can use later on. Hibernacula.
Interesting.
It says coordinates included in the database point to hundreds of snakes being killed in Elk Island National Park. I know I found a hibernacula, or I suspect there's a hibernacula in South Edmonton in the Blackmud Creek area. Because I remember when I would patrol this one chunk of the creek, there would always be snakes sunning themselves on this one particular cliff.
Okay.
Half the time I went there, I would see them just on that one cliff every spring. We have our two main species of deer in the province, mule and white-tailed deer. They're obviously getting smoked all the time. We have elk, which are technically a species of deer, and moose, which are technically a species of deer. Between 400 and 500 moose were killed by cars in Alberta in each of the last 4 years. And he agrees with me. It's one thing to hit a deer. It's a very different thing to hit a moose, Zimmerling said. Zimmerling being the, I lost him already. President and Chief Executive of the Alberta Conservation Association. That would be an amazing interview. I'm going to have to reach out to him after. But yeah, it's unfortunate, and that actually led into another story. This story linked in to a story which I'm sure affects a lot of us. Jasper National Park has almost 4 times the roadkill compared to Banff, which is pretty staggering. Abuma, you've also been to both parks. You've seen the differences in the approach to the two parks. Jasper, it's wild. You go through Hinton, and then suddenly you're just in the valley on the way into town. It's all wide open. There's that one corner where everybody almost hits the sheep. It's everybody that's driven to Jasper knows that corner.
Yeah.
The first big corner, all the sheep come onto the road. They lick all the salt and dirt off the road. And there are traffic jams all the time there. Whereas when you're going to Banff, you see there's the fencing up way in advance. The fencing starts either at or just after Canmore, and it goes along the highway pretty much all the way to Banff because that's such a heavily trafficked corridor.
Yeah,
you've got the bike trail that goes all the way down to Banff from Canmore. Between 2011 and 2021, Parks Canada reported 1,007 animals, coyote-sized and larger, were killed on roads in Jasper National Park. That includes 425 white-tailed deer, 161 elk, and 125 bighorn sheep that have been killed on roads in the national park. That number is nearly 4 times the number in Banff, where 272 animals were killed, even though the park has more kilometers of highway. It's much higher than we would like to see, said David Argument, a resource conservation officer with Jasper National Park. Most of the deaths are caused by commercial trucks. Jasper has a higher mortality rate because the main highway through the park is not twinned, fenced, or equipped with wildlife overpasses, unlike its neighbor. And it's not just on the highways where animals are dying. Over the past decade, more than 600 animals have died on the railway in both national parks, according to Parks Canada. The tracks are not fenced, and there are no wildlife overpasses. Have you heard of the electric mats they're putting along chunks of the railway now to give the animals a shock?
No, I haven't.
I believe that was done... I think that was done in Banff.
Okay.
Because in the areas where grain would spill out of the grain cars on the train,
The animals,
the animals would go to eat them.
Okay.
So they set up these electrified mats in the areas where the grain carts normally stop to get the animals to associate the grain with a bit of a shock. I forget for sure which park that was in. But yeah, the lack of wildlife overpasses and underpasses is also kind of surprising because they're both national parks. You would think they would both have a fairly good source of funding. Mm-hmm. Jasper right now, the town itself is obviously going through a lot, and a lot of that funding is now going to go towards rebuilding that town.
That is true.
And I'm sure we both want the best for everyone in Jasper
100%.
because it's a beautiful town. It's much more chill than Banff. It's a much quieter and, like, in my opinion, nicer getaway. It's not quite as busy and tourist trafficked. But yeah, they've got a lot to go on, not counting the overpass, underpass situation. For anyone who isn't quite familiar with what we're talking about, go on YouTube and look up videos for like wildlife overpasses or underpasses. But essentially, they build a land bridge over the highway in specific areas in order to encourage the animals to cross through more natural habitat instead of going across traffic. And it works really well when it's paired with fencing. So the fences funnel the animals towards the overpasses or underpasses. And that way they can just stay out of the highway but still have access to the rest of their habitat. Obviously not as good as there being no highway so the animals can travel freely, but...
People are going to go there, then that's the safest way.
Yeah.
Right? That's the best way.
So in response to the high number of animal deaths in Banff National Park, work to twin Highway 1 began in the 1980s, and by 2014, the fenced road had 38 wildlife underpasses and 6 overpasses. I didn't realize there were that many underpasses. They're a lot more subtle, but the overpasses, they're impossible to miss. It's a giant land bridge. These moves reduced vehicle collisions with wildlife in the park by more than 80%, according to Parks Canada. Why the same structures are not used in Jasper National Park is partly due to the geology, said argument. Highway 1 through Banff is largely straight. By comparison, Highway 16 in Jasper meanders, it snakes beside rivers and lakes, and slithers beneath several cliffs. Slithers was what they said in the article. That was not me being flowery with my words. A 2016 Parks Canada report estimated that up to 10% of elk in Jasper die on roads and rails. In 2020, there were more than 35,000 collisions on Canada's roads between vehicles and wildlife, injuring almost 2,000 people and killing 17, according to Transport Canada. That's actually less than I thought for all of Canada. That is a lot less than I thought. I will definitely need to do a separate episode to cover the Jasper wildfire. Yeah. That there's so much that went into that. The actual firestorm itself, the conditions that led up to it, the aftermath, and what's going to be happening in the town. That is, if anyone knows any good fire experts or anyone that can speak on the Jasper wildfire, please reach out to me on my Instagram at Ranger Gareth or just in person. I feel like the majority of the listeners know me on a personal level, so just reach out if you know someone that would be a good fire expert to bring onto the story. Another book that I keep recommending to everybody, I'm sure I've already told you Abuma as well, but the book Fire Weather by John Violante. It's all about the Fort Mac wildfires, and it goes into great detail as to what led to the fire, why it was so bad, what were the weather conditions, what happened in the actual response to the wildfire, and what was the aftermath. As the world gets hotter and Alberta's forests and BC's forests seem to be burning longer and hotter and the damage keeps increasing, I find that book is going to become more and more important as the years go on. It lays out what are the conditions we need to look out for, and it also says that they're going to happen anyways. The world's getting hotter, the forests are getting drier, springs are happening earlier, the snowpack is melting faster. We're going to continue having hot, dry summers. Sorry for bringing down the mood. It's very somber, but wildfires are unfortunately becoming a more common reality for all of us here.
True.
Moving on to the next story, for a place that I actually recently was, up in the Yukon. So, just for anyone that doesn't know, my wife and I did a big road trip all the way up through northern BC and the Yukon and Northwest Territories, all the way to Tuktoyaktuk, which is the farthest north you can drive in Canada. It ends at the Arctic Ocean. But during my time in the Yukon, I did speak to a lot of people there about what life was like in the Yukon, and two things they said were their primary economic drivers were A, the government, because that's where a lot of the jobs are, and B, mining. And one of the biggest mining companies is Victoria Gold. Victoria Gold operates a mine called Eagle Mine north of Mayo in the Yukon. I believe it's pronounced Mayo, like mayonnaise. I don't know if it's Mayo. I apologize. Someone please correct me. Victoria Gold reported a collapse of the heap leach pad at its Eagle Mine. Now, a heap leach pad is essentially, the gold mining process can be very toxic. What they do is they take the toxic remnants and they put them in this giant pile, essentially, in order for the contaminants to all kind of be concentrated in one specific area.
Okay.
Photos posted by Yukon News around noon local time. The day this article came out was June 24th. So I guess noon around June 24th showed a partial collapse of the heap leach pad, which is constructed on a hillside to hold mine ore so that gold can be dissolved with a cyanide solution for recovery. We're going to get into the ways to recover gold in a minute, but it is very, very toxic. This Eagle Mine is 310 kilometers by road, or roughly 167 kilometer flight east from Dawson City in the Yukon. And the company also reported a portion of the failure as left containment, indicating a potential environmental component. So when they say a portion of the failure is left containment, that's a fun way of saying there are now going to be toxins in the environment.
Yes. And when they say a portion, it's not as specific as we'd like. Like maybe the people up there might be able to see it if it's portioned off, but how much of it is a portion? What is a portion?
I believe that the Yukon government actually ended up taking over this mine. This article is about a month old, but I believe the Yukon government ended up taking over for a while. The Eagle Mine, which employs roughly 500 people, produced 166,730 ounces of gold during 2023. So
That is a lot of gold.
To give people an idea of how much that is, let's see. So the gold price per ounce, is this Canadian dollars or American dollars? I believe this is American dollars. I want to switch it over to Canadian. Okay, so since most of my audience is Canadian, $3,402 per ounce.
Wow.
Now, all right, so let's calculate that quickly. 3,402 times 166,730. They produced $567 million worth of gold.
Wow. So you can finally buy two houses, one in Vancouver, one in Toronto.
God.
That is a lot of money, though. That is a lot of gold, too.
It's insane. And then I did pull up another article as well about the heap leach failure. So later on, this article came out August 16th, and it was confirmed that the tailings heap by Victoria Gold has leached into the groundwater. Test results from July 31st to August 2nd saw a sharp increase in cyanide from various locations in Haggard Creek, exceeding guidelines for aquatic life when the company discharged water into the creek. Now, I'm not a great chemist. I don't know if do you think you're pretty good at chemistry?
Not my strong suit, I tell you that.
But we both know cyanide is a
not
bad
good.
thing.
Not good.
Cyanide, strychnine, lead, mercury, there are a couple things that are universally recognized as not good. And I'm pretty sure gold recovery involves cyanide and mercury. Like, it's this ring is probably, there's so much toxic stuff associated with it. It's weird to think about because I'll admit I like gold.
Yes.
But God, is it rough on the environment.
It is.
At a briefing last week, so again, this article came out on August 16th, so a week before that, government officials and scientists said Victoria Gold personnel discovered at least 68 dead Arctic grayling and slimy sculpin, those are both types of fish for people that aren't familiar, in Haggart Creek on August 2nd. Between August 3rd and 8th, cyanide levels have returned to what was seen before the discharge event. Cyanide was the primary contaminant that we saw in Haggart Creek during the discharge. Williams said. Who was Williams again? Should have looked that up before I started talking. Bear with me, people. And I can't find who he is. Ignore that. I'm sure he's very important. But dead fish in the creek near Eagle Mine were likely killed by cyanide, Yukon officials said. Those findings contradict what Victoria Gold CEO John McConnell told CBC earlier this week, that hard water or chlorine may have killed the fish rather than cyanide. Cameron Sinclair, a senior fisheries biologist with the territorial government, said there was no indication that water hardness caused the death of the fish. So, how is gold extracted? From what I could find, there are three main ways to do it. One is called the refractory gold process. That one is kind of hard to explain, so I'm going to skip that one. The main technology used to extract gold is the cyanide process, in which gold is leached from the ore by treatment with a solution of cyanide. The first step is comminution, or grinding, to increase the surface area and expose the gold to the extracting solution. The extraction is conducted by dump leaching or heap leaching processes. So again, you've got the heap leach pad, you grind down all the ore, you pour the cyanide on it, and then extract the gold like that. There's also an amalgamation process involving mercury that can be used to recover very small gold particles, and it's still widely used in small-scale artisanal mining across the world. Mercury forms a mercury-gold amalgam with smaller gold particles, and then the gold is concentrated by boiling away the mercury from the amalgam, which obviously means that mercury is getting into the air.
Yeah.
This is effective in extracting very small gold particles, but the process is hazardous due to the toxicity of mercury. From what I know, that's actually being used in, oh God, what is it? I believe French Guyana, and Suriname, which used to be Dutch Guyana. I think that whole area, and then that chunk of northeast Brazil, there's a lot of illegal gold mining happening, which is leading to a lot of violence out in the jungles because the people that are doing the gold mining are obviously getting a lot of money out of it.
Yeah.
And the people whose land is being poisoned are obviously not a fan of that.
Happy about that.
But again, Brazil is another huge country. There's a lot going on there. I don't know how much of a, why am I forgetting the word? Priority? The gold mining in Northeast BC in rural communities is to the central government, but it is directly poisoning the Amazon. If anyone hasn't seen it before, just look up illegal gold mining Brazil or illegal gold mining Guyana, and you will see some rough photos. So that's what I've got for today's headlines. Abuma, anything else? Any other environmental news you wanted to discuss? Anything exciting happening?
What I would say is I never knew how toxic the production of gold was. There's a lot of mercury, a lot of cyanide, and it's a shame that that has seeped into the environment, right? Especially with that was Eagle Mine,
yeah.
Closing down. Yeah, that's quite a bit. It's what I would say. The only positive is that not a lot of people live in the Yukon. So
there are less people in the Yukon than there are in St. Albert.
Exactly, right? But also the people that live there are part of that particular thing, right? They go there for it. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's not a lot of people, but the people that are there for that purpose, right? If there's a cleaner way of getting gold out, that'd be great. If not, we have to maybe add some more restrictions, add some things that don't directly, I guess, affect either the air or the water. That'd be great.
Because I think there's always going to be an appetite for gold, at least for the rest of
100%.
our lifetimes,
Yes.
unless someone actually discovers, like, the Philosopher's Stone and learns how to transmute lead into gold somehow.
Yeah.
But unless we're in, like, the Full Metal Alchemist timeline, I don't think we're going to get that before either of us are in the ground, unfortunately. It sucks, like, because you look at gold and it's it's
Beautiful.
bright, it's shiny, it's beautiful, it's rare. And then you look at the destruction, and I don't know. You realize life is also pretty rare. Like this is our one planet. We've still got over 8 billion people, and the population is still climbing. We're gonna have to find a way to do things in a less toxic way.
True.
Same with the carrot and the stick. If we can find a way, if we can incentivize research into less harmful extractive processes, I think that's good. I am a major proponent. If I ever run for office, please, my 39 loyal listeners, please vote for me. But I would just pump so much money into scientific funding because we need to keep finding better ways to do things. Like, society always progresses.
True.
We could progress faster. And if there was more money being put into cleaner tech, cleaner energy, cleaner mining, I'm not anti-mining. I've seen the side effects of mining. I've seen the damage it causes to the landscape. But I also understand that we are a very consumptive species. We do require a lot of resources to live. So I'm not saying shut down all the mining. That's not feasible, at least not in the short term, and probably not even in the medium term. Maybe in the long term, if we find out how to recycle all of our products way, way better.
Yes.
But again, probably for our life cycles, we'll still need mining. It's still going to be a major part of humanity. But if we could just find ways
Better
to make
way
it less toxic, less harmful for the environment.
Clean away, better way, right?
The Yukon is so beautiful, and it's so rugged and so raw, and you think even all the way up there, there's cyanide leaching into streams and killing fish. It's as a guy who struggles to catch Arctic grayling, hearing that many just got wiped out, I'm like, man, on my best day, I don't think I've even seen 68 Arctic grayling in my life.
Wow.
So to hear they're getting wiped out like that, it's sad. But again, I'm a hopeless optimistic. I hope that we can find a way to make things better in the future, boost that scientific funding. I'm sure the mines are also pumping a bunch of money into research as well because they don't want this bad press. Victoria Gold doesn't want this bad press, and the people of the Yukon don't want that bad press either because Victoria Gold is a major employer. So, like, I'm sure a lot of them are pretty nervous right now because the company's being... I don't know if they're out of receivership yet or if the Yukon government is still running the show for now, but that can be scary. If that's your retirement plan, I've got another 10 years to work at this mining company, then I can retire with a full pension. And suddenly this story breaks. That's scary. So if we can just...
Scary,
Yeah. I want the best for everybody. I hope we can find a way to make it work without destroying things in the process.
True.
Well, Habuma, thanks for coming on today.
Of course.
It's been a pleasure.
Let's
Let's do another one in a couple months.
100%.
Awesome. For anyone anyone that made it all the way to the end of the episode, you can find this at rangergareth.com. You can find me on Instagram at rangergareth, or find this on Spotify or YouTube at the Ranger Gareth Podcast. See you next time.